How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses to help? Little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action. And by this we know that we are from the truth and will assure our hearts before him whenever our hearts condemn us, for God is greater than our hearts. The fourth Sunday of Easter is always known as Good Shepherd Sunday because the gospel lessons refer to Jesus' own words about himself, where he says, "I am the good shepherd. I am the gate of the sheepfold." And today we are in front of the beautiful altar window at Trinity, the Good Shepherd window. Like so many of these stained glass artworks, it shows Jesus in the role of a shepherd, guiding and caring for the sheep, both young and old. While many sermons today are about Jesus, our Good Shepherd, as I was preparing my sermon and looking through the various references that had to do with Jesus about being a shepherd, I saw the passage that I just quoted from the first letter of John, and it jumped out at me. Of course, I read it many times before, but I saw something new this time that I hadn't noticed before. We will assure our hearts before him whenever our hearts condemn us, for God is greater than our hearts. There's something going on here as we consider Jesus, our Good Shepherd, something deeply connected between Easter and how you and I see ourselves. Let me give you an illustration I recently found. In some of my time at home during the COVID-19 separation, I watched Netflix. Netflix is a way of watching movies and TV shows on a digital device. Remember MASH? I found it on Netflix. I've always loved this series that went on for more than 10 seasons in the 1970s and 1980s and was recently ranked as one of the top 10 TV shows of all time. It's a dark comedy about a mobile Army surgical unit near the front lines during the Korean conflict. The main characters ranged somewhat over the seasons, but featured Alan Alda as a surgeon, along with other surgeons and nurses and the camp commander, and of course, the clerk. One of my favorite characters, however, was the camp chaplain, played by William Christopher. In all the medical shows, this is one of the most realistic depictions of a chaplain that has ever been created. Today, in most, if not all, the TV shows about doctors and hospitals, the chaplains are nowhere to be seen, even though modern-day hospitals require spiritual care for patients. But in MASH, Father Mulcahy was a fixture, a main character. Anyway, in one episode, Chaplain Francis Mulcahy was preparing for a visit from the Archbishop in charge of the Army chaplains. And understandably, he was very nervous, became quite agitated as he walked around the camp, noticing the casual gambling and drinking and generally how morally low was the life of the soldiers. He was worried that the Archbishop would judge him harshly. The Archbishop arrived late one evening, and the next morning was the featured guest at the Saturday morning Mass. But when the time came, most of the camp was gathered together in the mess tent. Father Mulcahy was nowhere to be found. Instead, he was in the post-op ward, dressed in his PJs and his robe, talking to a young soldier who had just found out that he had leukemia. The soldier, played by a very young Patrick Swayze, found out about his disease when he volunteered to give blood to his buddy, who had also been wounded. Ironically, Swayze died in 2009 of pancreatic cancer. Father Mulcahy was corralled by the company clerk, and realizing he was late for church and had never had time to write a sermon, went into the mess tent, still dressed in his bathrobe. He then told the parable about two men, each one facing his own crisis. one who was all undone by the visit of a dignitary and the behavior of others, trying to impress someone, looking for recognition and a pat on the back. And another who thought only of the needs of his buddy, and even when he found out that he himself was going to die. Father Mulcahy says, "When the first man saw the dignity and the selflessness of the second man, I realized how petty I had been. God didn't put us here for a pat on the back. He created us so he could be here himself." This is the message of Easter. God created us so that he could be here with us, among us, leading us and caring for us like a good shepherd. And we are the sheep. But keep in mind, sheep are not pets. On my pilgrimages to the Holy Land, I saw many flocks of sheep and goats on the hillsides in both Jordan and Israel. The shepherds are, for the most part, Bedouins living in tents and caves, but making a good living by their flocks. They raise goats and sheep for both the wool and the mutton. Just as sheep have been raised in that part of the world for thousands and thousands of years. Abraham had many flocks. Jacob raised the flocks of his father-in-law. Moses was a shepherd, and shepherds were among the first to see the Son of God lying in a manger in Bethlehem. Sheep are not just pets to be pampered just for companionship. Sheep are meant to produce something. The Lord expects something from us, but at the same time, he lays down his life for us. Even if we don't produce, he will never abandon or condemn us, even when we condemn ourselves. Which brings me back to that portion of the letter of John that I saw in a new way. I certainly can identify with Father Mulcahy, for like you, I can get upset about the wrong things. I know many of my clergy friends who are feeling very cut off from their members, without the routines of worship in the church and visitation in homes. They feel they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And maybe you feel that way too, cut off, adrift in a new way of contacting others, unsure of how to use digital devices to communicate, anxious about the future of your business or your school or your home or your family. I know I feel that way. And sometimes I feel slighted or underappreciated, or feel like others aren't paying attention, or maybe I don't get the attention I deserve, or maybe, just maybe, I don't deserve the love that Jesus pours out so willingly for me and toward the whole creation and everyone in it that he loves so much. My heart condemns me. In the MASH episode, once the sermon is over, the visiting archbishop rose and clasped Father Mulcahy in a fond embrace. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd who has already paid the price for our selfishness, protects us and guides us and cares for us so that we might be better equipped for service. We are valuable, we are important, and we have an essential role to play in life. We are called to write our own gospels for today. And our gospels are not contained in sermons or in books, but in truth and in action. We are chosen by God to see the needs of our brothers and sisters, the need for material goods, surely, and the need for spiritual gifts. There are those that are poor in material goods and those who are poor in spirit, and both are blessed children of God. The care and love of the Good Shepherd is boundless, and when our hearts condemn us, we can be reassured that our value is not based on the measures employed by the world around us, by how much we own or how important we are, or how much we do or how we do it, or how we look or where we live. Our value lies only in the eyes of God, whose love abides in us, and whose love flows out through the world. Because as Father Mulcahy said, God created us so that God could be here with us. Amen.